Dale, how you doing?
Doing well. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh man, it's so nice to see you and so nice to have you and thank you for coming and joining our live stream. We so appreciate it.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So we've caught you in the middle of the day where you are. Are you in the middle of mastering at the moment? How's your day been going?
Yeah, I've been up since 7 a mastering, so it's been a fun one. But it's nice to take a little breather and talk to you and get to share and just open a little window to the world inside my 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 man cave here.
Wow, look at that. Wow.
It's a
Talk
little bit
how
of a
did you
mess, but
whereabouts is that?
we're in Pasadena. This room's in Pasadena. Yeah, we're currently have one Atmos room here, and then we
Yep.
have um, two more mastering rooms next door, and we have a transfer room with old tape machines and stuff, and then I have a room at home as well. Like halfway through 2020 in the pandemic, we had a little midnight earthquake here, and I thought I need to build a room at home. I don't want to be away from my family, in the middle of the pandemic,
Wow.
earthquakes happening. Like I need a room at home. So
Yeah. So do you spend most of your time mastering in your studio there as opposed to at home?
yeah, so I typically I work in both places. I work here during the day, kind of like 9 or 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Um, and then I try to work out and spend time with the fam. And then typically when I'm working late at night, unless it's doing Atmos, I'm at home. So anything from like 10 to 2 a.m.'s at home.
Wow. Okay. So how do you? Because you mentioned that you've been mastering since 7 a.m. this morning, and it's around 1 p.m. where you are now. How do you protect your ears? Like, how do you maintain your ears to make sure that your hearing doesn't deteriorate throughout the day?
Well, I have two answers to that. The first thing is I don't listen very loud. I'm not someone who needs to. One of the things I've been trying to cultivate for the past decade plus is I don't try to replace uh, emotion with volume. I mean, I love to listen to music loud once in a while, but when I'm working, I'm not. I don't need to, turn up the speakers really loud to try to feel a song. I've tried to train myself. I have a button on my console. I do have a volume knob. I never use it. I have a button on the console that Josh Florian from JCF Audio made me, and it's just a button, and that's the volume that I always listen at. It says
Right.
F1, and that's just my fixed listening position. So I listen, 12 to 14 hours a day at that volume. And the second thing that helps is I am a big believer in PMC audio speakers. They help me listen at low volumes but with clarity. A lot of speakers you do need to turn them up to like get a certain kind of loading in the room and a certain kind of balance. But I've been working on PMCs for a couple of years now, and they help me just listen at my low old man volume. And you know, no, I just love love the speakers, and they help me just work all day at a particular volume. So
Right. And you can be confident that even though you're listening at a low volume, that if someone gets in their car and cranks it, it's
yep.
the settings that you've set are still going to be intact and pure.
Yes, yes. I know from a mixing perspective, I know mixers need to be able to turn it up, turn it down to kind of experience the transients in different ways. But from a mastering perspective, I try to rule all that kind of emotion and all that kind of bodily feedback that we get from sound, and I really try to make it more clinical and more of an unbiased approach to volume. So yeah.
How long did it take you to learn that?
Well, my dad trained me early on, and the two things that he always had me do is he had me listen to the same references every day. So I developed a set of references. They were his at the time, but
What were they?
Oh man, everything from Sergio Mendes, "The Look of Love." It was a Bill Schnee mix that Doug Sachs mastered. It's a great sounding song. Usher, back then, these are my older references. Usher, "Simple Things." Let me see if I could think of one more. I remember we also had an Audio Slave, just kind of like rock thing to listen to as well. And the thing that this did is when you show up to the studio and you turn on your fixed listening position and you press play to those references and you've listened to them 900 days in a row, it tells you how it acclimates you. It's like, oh, are my ears, if it sounds different, you ask the questions, oh, am I hearing different today? Do I have a head cold? Or is something wrong with the speakers? Is something messing with me? It helps us, kind of self-calibrate and also weed out any issues that we're having in the room at the moment. And with a large amount of gear, you're bound to have issues, at least once a week. So
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned quite a few things there, one being your father, which I would really like to talk to you about. But before we get to that, I just wanted to ask you quickly about the week ahead for you leading up to the Grammys, because of course you are Grammy nominated for your work on Doja Cat's Planet Her. What was,
thank you.
how do you remember? Yes, congratulations. And do you
Thank you.
remember when you found out that you were nominated?
Yeah, I found out it was kind of crazy because I that morning, uh, with the previous Grammy nominations, I was really, really focused on the Grammy nomination date. Like, oh, I got to make sure I'm watching. And for some reason, I was really busy this particular morning, and I was so taken by surprise. I mean, I always knew that Doja Cat, she's amazing, and her album's amazing, and it deserves to be nominated for record and album of the year. But for whatever reason, my mind was elsewhere at the moment, so I was kind of taken aback, and it was just very exciting because it's just I wasn't laser, as with times before, I was laser focused in on when the nominations come out, and for some reason this I wasn't. So it was very surprising, and I'm just very blessed to be able to go. We have a LA chapter celebration on Saturday morning, and then of course next week I'll be in Vegas.
That's amazing. What did you go? Have you been before?
I have. We were nominated in 2020, right before the pandemic, for Khalid's Talk,
Yeah.
and then the next year during the pandemic, I won a Latin Grammy, while sitting right here, because we weren't allowed to go. And that was really funny because it was all in Spanish, and I barely understand Spanish, so I was just like sitting there, and not me and my friends who won that Latin Grammy for Best Engineered. We didn't know if we won. My friend even thought he lost for a second because he didn't understand what was going on, and then we found out we won. It was a lot of fun. So
Nice. What is it? What can it mean for your career to obviously to be nominated for a Grammy, but also to win?
it's a wild thing. I mean, I'm so thankful. I feel like it's kind of surreal, because I mean, a Grammy is only something you could hope to win, and it's not something that you can make happen. It's something that obviously all of us work for, and it's something that we want to shoot for. But there's no amount of like business decisions and, oh, I'm going to meet this person, I'm going to work on this project, I'm going to do this thing. There's no planning to get there really.
Mm.
Um, People, I mean, I guess you could plan to do it, but that wasn't my way about it. My way about it was always like it was a hope and a goal, but not something that was part of my daily planning. My daily planning is just work hard, finish the projects that are in front of me, maintain good relationships with people, get projects over the line, go, 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 go. And I wasn't thinking a lot about like, oh, I need to get on this project because this project's going to be a Grammy winning project. Um, and oftentimes that could cause you to make decisions that's kind of like motivation from the wrong place. And people can sense that, oh, you just want to work on this project because you want recognition for you or whatever. And the things that led me to the projects that allowed me to be on Grammy award-winning projects or nominated projects were just good relationships that they knew that I would, do what it took, that I would give my full attention to it. And at the time when we were mastering Doja, we weren't like, this is gonna, we weren't thinking about Grammys. We were just thinking about how can we make the music as great as possible.
Mm.
We weren't thinking about success. We weren't thinking about anything other than let's do great work now. Let's get this project across the line. And, and then that from that place, great things happen. I believe it's the most streamed. It, I don't want to misquote, but there are a lot of accomplishments that she's had off this album that haven't happened before, including the Grammy nominations. So, we just tried to operate from that place as opposed to like, let's win a Grammy, so.
Right. So you mentioned that the idea is just to do the work and, to build good relationships through doing the work. So is that how Planet Her, how you got on the project? Is it just through that years of relationship building and track record?
Yeah, it was just relationships. It was, you know, um, I worked on all of the Jeff Ellis tracks, and really that came about from we had several successful interactions before on different projects. He's a very talented individual, has a very particular take on mixing, a very artistic, very emotion driven mixing style. And over time, we kind of developed this thing like, you just have people that you resonate with and,
Mm.
people that you resonate less with. And Jeff is one of those individuals that we resonate on a personal friendship level. We resonate on a mixing, mastering level. And we have a lot of projects under our belt where we worked out the kinks of, because whenever you're working on a relationship with someone, you're kind of just like you would in a romantic relationship, you're ironing out things, ironing out differences and viewpoints. And I'm trying to understand what he's hearing. He's trying to understand what I'm hearing. We're trying to, come together to make something great. And we had ironed those things out over the course of several projects. And so by the time Doja came, it was just like it was just, we were just doing the thing that we had developed already. And it was a lot of fun. That was a late night project. That was a very last minute late night project, so
How late?
it was late. I remember, I know I was working till at least 2 in the morning on that one. But we probably started on I think on the album I think I mastered 6 or 7 songs. And I did some of the on some of the songs I didn't master. I actually worked on the Atmos versions of like Woman and stuff with Jesse Ernster. I
Yeah.
apologize if I miss spoke his name, but I got to work on a lot of different aspects of this album. But yeah, it was definitely we go hard, when it comes to getting a project across the line. Um, a lot of the reason why I found that people like to come to me for mastering is that what one day someone put it as, the reason I work with you is because you would walk through a brick wall for me. And I had to like think about that. I was like, I don't know if I like that, but I do like it because it's like if someone comes to me and they're having a problem and I have the time, like I will do whatever it takes to get it across the line. And I'm not going to nickel and dime someone or like, oh, I got to go home, or whatever. It's like we just get the project across the line. So it's
Right.
and I mean, being able to do that, it's one thing for a mastering engineer to be able to do good mastering. It's another thing completely to be able to do good mastering under highly pressurized circumstances and have the sort of like QC quality control methodology to make sure that if you do make a mistake that you catch it before it goes to your client.
Mm.
And so it's really not just the mastering that people come to me for. I do make mistakes. I try to do that as little as possible, but part of what we've developed here is very systematic approach to things so that we deliver almost 100% of the time exactly what our client needs. So
Right. You mentioned that pressure. Is it the pressure from the client, from the A&R, from the commercial expectations, from like where is that pressure coming from? And is a lot of it also self-imposed just to make it the best that it can be?
yeah, I'm always feeling pressure for myself, these notes aren't particular to Doja, just to be clear, but
Yeah.
pressures come from everywhere. I mean, pressure could come from yourself, from your own wanting to get a gig. Typically, that is self-destructive pressure because it causes you to do things that you wouldn't do naturally out of fear. But there are certain there's are political pressures. There are people in their mind, you know, maybe the mixer will want to use me because we have a relationship, but maybe the A&R, or maybe the label exec, or maybe, you know, a writer on the team only sends their stuff to so and so. And you know, people want to use the people that they've had success with before. And I'm a bit of an underdog, you know, like I don't although I've had success, I don't have the, you know, 30, 40-year track record of some of my predecessors that I'm still working with, you know, or working not with, but working in the same industry as. So there are years and years of relationships, and I can't discount that. You know, if an A&R has been using the same guy for 25 plus years and has had 9 Grammy award winning albums and, you know, all the success, I don't discount that. You know, and sometimes that's the decision that the team collectively decides most with. So there are these kind of political pressures, not necessarily in a negative sense, but just these sorts of like, this has worked before, so why are we changing things?
Sure.
Um, and you know, there's time pressures. Oftentimes, you know, if I have a project that I think is going to take 3 hours, but I have an hour and a half, like, you have the time you have. Um, and oftentimes these bigger projects, you don't get any warning. So it's you know, we schedule most of our projects out 1 to 2 weeks for the next available slot. And a lot of these things come in and it's like, if you can't do it in 90 minutes, we're moving on, you know? So, this, you have to be flexible and able to kind of like be fluid, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn there. Wow. You
Trial by fire.
I've seen you talk about the fact that you like to get recordings come to you that have what you've called professional authenticity. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that is a developing idea, um, in my head. But you know, authenticity for me today, professional authenticity is what I would say today, and this might differ from what I've said before. But I there are a lot of people in the music business that are a chasing what was, you know, and there's no shame in that, and I'm not talking down to it because it's especially profitable, especially in the film and TV world, you know, or in, you know, you're trying to make something that sounds like someone else, you're trying to make, you know, a track that sounds like Katy Perry so that they don't, you know, the label doesn't have to pay 200 grand for a Katy Perry thing. They could have something that sounds really close for, you know, I get all that. But from an artistic point of view, um, we there's a balance between referencing what's out there in the world that is great and also trying to bring something new, um, trying to bring something of you, and that's the authentic thing. It's like all of the years of my listening to music, all of the years of my training, and the amalgam of, you know, 10,000 projects or whatever. I don't even know if that number's real, but a lot of projects that have kind of shaped me over the years, and the relationships that I've had with people, and the conversations, and the failures and the successes, is like all those things come to the table when someone masters a record with me, you know, and I that I try to bring all of that and all of that collective learning to not only do a mastering job, but to make something great as much as is possible, you know? And
Mm.
so from a mastering perspective, I'm always I'm trying to, and it's a balance between doing what the client wants, you know, but also revealing what they might not know is possible. You know, and I like to work with people who have that same, who try to bring themselves into the project. They don't just try to like, oh, we're just going to match this thing. You know, we're just going to do this thing that's already been done before that I saw. I'm just going to use this plugin that I saw so and so use. I'm just going to, you know, there's all these things that we can copy,
Mm.
and we all copy. There's nothing wrong with copying. But even when you copy, even when I see something cool, you know, on the internet with limiting or something, I always try to refine it for myself. So it's never, you know, I never buy a piece of gear. Well, I have bought a piece of gear before because I saw someone using it, but I try to use it in my way, you know,
Okay.
and it goes the same for, it goes the same, not to go too long on this, but it goes same for songwriting and mixing, you know, songwriters not just trying to write I remember I worked with this guy, he just wanted to write Maroon 5 songs. I'm like, Maroon 5 already exists, dude, and you are great, and you can do something greater if you just do you, you know, or you know, mixers, like not over trying to sound, you know, a lot of guys, they want to sound like Tony Maserati, and that's great, and there's a balance to that, but how can you take all those elements that take what you love and then add more of what you love, you know, so to speak.
Right.
So
So who to that point, who were the mastering engineers that you loved that you kind of took little bits from, but then added your own take on?
man, I have a reference list that I listen to every day, so I can go for hours on, you know, I could go for hours. Probably some of my earliest influences were let's see, on the earlier end of things, I really appreciated Doug Sachs, you know, God rest his soul. You know, Tom Coyne, who's also passed. A lot of people who have passed on, you know, but from a more current state, you know, I love the guys at Sterling. I reference their stuff all the time. Joe Laporta, Chris Geringer, you know, Randy Merrill. They all do fantastic work. One of my favorite masters ever is a Tony Maserati, Chris Geringer duo on a song called Boyfriend by Selena Gomez. I think that's like a mind blowing piece of work. I love Colin Leonard from Sing Mastering. He, one of my references I listen to almost on the daily. I'll even throw up the music video because it's so cool. Is Ape Shit by pardon my French, on Ape Shit for the Carters. He did an incredible master on that. Trying to think, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of gosh, so many people. There's a wonderful master from the Mastering Palace, Dave Kutch, on Justin Timberlake 2020. That whole album is the warmest, gooeyest, punchiest thing I've ever heard. So I've got a lot of love. I've got a lot of love for, you know, a lot of people who have done great work, and they kind of stretch you because it's like, how did they do that? And then you spend the next 6 months trying to figure out, you know, how they do that. Last, I'll say John Greenham. He was the guy who beat everyone for all the Grammys when we were there in 2020. Him and Billy just kind of swept all the Grammys. They took them all and took them home. And I mean, that was some very forward thinking work. I mean, that was a really beautiful mixture between hi-fi, but then also they push the boundaries of things. A lot of people are like, well, certain songs are kind of have a distortion or something, but that was all by design. You know, I remember John telling me that one of the songs they just wanted, you know, it to sound a particular way when they played it really loud, and they wanted that to translate when they weren't playing it loud. So that's why that song sounds, and it's like they were willing to push the boundaries of sound and of what you should do for the sake of, you know, evoking a certain feeling from the listener. And I think that's terribly courageous, you know?
Yeah. absolutely. There was a comment that came up there just saying, how many mastering engineers can bench 315? Is that a reference to you?
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. I wonder who that was. Yeah, I love CrossFit. It's one of the things, and that's actually taught me a lot about. I remember when I first started CrossFit 6 years ago. It was when I really started to get busy as a mastering engineer, and it would be 9 p.m. and I would have, 6 masters to do before I go home. And that's, if you work till 3 a.m., that's one project, one song an hour for 6 hours straight, no breaks. And it's kind of like CrossFit because we have these grueling workouts, and it's just, you learn to just put one foot in front of the other and not, I mean, you're tired, you want to stop, but you just learn that devotion to just keep putting the one foot in front of the other. And when we're mastering, it's the same thing. I've developed a way and a mindset that if I'm mastering at 9 a.m., fresh as a spring chicken or whatever, there's my dad saying things coming out, or it's 2 a.m. and I've been mastering all day. I bring the same. I talk about to my team. We have a team here, and I talk about it in terms of ritual. It's a very. I do the same thing every time. I make sure I'm feeling the same way when I start a master every time. I have a very particular way I start things. I have a very particular way I end things. And it's to develop, no matter what time I'm working in the day, that it's the same amount of focus. It's the same intentions. I have kind of, I don't know, people call them different things, but we'll just call them intentions. Like, I have certain things that I want to do for this project. I have certain things I want to bring. And those are expressed, if not verbally by myself, internally, that I want to do good for this project, and that never changes. And if I ever deviate from that, I get messed up. So
Right.
all that to say, CrossFit has brought that sort of thing. Like, you bring that sort of intention, because in CrossFit, if you get tired and you deviate and you do a rep wrong, you get injured, and that kind of an analogy into what I do in the studios. You injure yourself, or you injure the song, or you damage a relationship with the client. So it's very, like I said, a ritualistic how I bring myself to a song, or how I master something.
Yeah, I love the two very different disciplines crossing over and finding common ground. Um,
Yeah,
you mentioned your dad, Bernie, who is an acclaimed mastering engineer as well. And did you grow up in the studio watching your
I
dad at
did.
work?
I did. And he moved from Colorado to California when I was maybe 1 or 2 years old. He came to be a songwriter, and that led him into engineering. He was always a great engineer, and that landed him a gig early on with Neil Diamond, and he has
Right.
been working with him ever since. So I grew up not only in my dad's studio in our backyard, or in Hollywood, wherever it was at the time, but I also grew up in Neil's studio around music. I remember getting I mean, I got to do so many cool things just being, because Neil's whole camp and whole family, and at Archangel and all these places, like, it's a family atmosphere. They're wonderful people. It's a wonderful culture. And I got to grow up in all that, and also just the random things that come through. When Tenacious D recorded their albums, they wanted to use Neil's engineer, and that was my dad. So we got
Wow.
to, so I got to sit in and watch Dave Grohl, play drums, and all these classic moments of, just, I got to experience all this. I got to hear all this. I got to, also my mom's a pianist, so I got to grow up around, classical music. I got to listen to all the music that my dad was listening to, a lot of, like, stuff from the 70s, James Taylor, Seals and Crofts. So it's like all these years just kind of like taking in all these sonic things, and it really did shape me.
Yeah. Did it make it, the fact that you had exposure to these people as a young person, as you moved into the industry, did it take away perhaps any of the, the sense of awe that could be quite stifling when you start working with big names. The fact that you've been around some of these names all your life, did it just make it a little bit more seamless?
Yeah, I don't think it took away any awe. I think it prepared me for what was to come. I obviously growing up in such a healthy, we know that we've all heard the stories of non-healthy environments in the music business. We've all been in them, but I got a good picture of what a healthy uh, environment looked like, a healthy how people treated each other, how those interactions. So I feel like it laid a good foundation for the things I wanted to be, and then but it also when I got my start, I was working for my dad at his recording studio, and I wasn't shielded from people who, didn't share in that culture and who were mean and who were, crass and angry. And so I also, having the good and then starting to work with people who didn't share those same values, it also helped me decide who I didn't want to be like. I'm like, oh, I'd rather not be like that guy, or I'd rather not be at the time when I first got my start, the economy was like really shaky and all this stuff. And there were a lot of people talking about how great the old days were and kind of angry. And I was kind of like, I don't want to be like that, or talking about how great analog was to digital, or like how the music business doesn't have any, there was a lot of negativity at the time. And it helped me, having the positive start, seeing where people were. I just had this great balance of like, oh, these are the things I want in my life. These are the things I don't want in my life. And it helped kind of balance not only kind of a mindset for me, but also for the people that I work with here at the studio.
Right. Was it inevitable that you would start working with your dad? Was music going to be your, no?
It wasn't inevitable. I did a lot of things like through high school. I was in ROTC randomly. I
What's
was
that?
heavy. That's like high school training for the military.
Oh,
I, it was wild. Like just a rant. I was like, oh, I'll do that because I had to move to a new high school and they had it and it seemed interesting. I did that. I did, I was heavy into running and sports and basketball, and those were the things that were on my mind at the time. And then I started doing some music in our little church group, and that kind of grew up and flourished. And then what really brought me into music is my current wife, Mary. I met her and she was in choir. So I joined choir because I wanted to be around her. And turned out there was a boy and girl choir. So we weren't even in the same choir. But I had this he was a very, he was an amazing choir director, but he was also very kind of hard and like in the best of ways. Like he was strong and he was teaching us, solfege in ninth grade, and really expecting a lot of us, which at the time you don't really appreciate. You're like, man, this guy's really hard. But and now I really appreciate it because as I was talking with John Castelli, I really feel like the things that sorry to go off on a tangent, but this is a good tangent. One
yeah.
of the things we were discussing is that the people who have musical backgrounds and who didn't just come up through engineering school, but who have been through heavy ear training, as not just like what a four chord is or something, but being able to, both me and John went through like some pretty heavy classical ear training in terms of like, what does a major chord sound like? Okay, now what does a first inversion major chord sound like? All right, what does a second inversion minor seven chord sound like? And you start to, it's really hard in the beginning to even know what a perfect fourth sounds like. But you develop you sit there and you work so hard to understand this language that you have only touched the surface of, and you start to hear these interactions between tones and between frequencies. And that ear training, I believe, is what really unlocks the best in an engineer, because you hear how things are supposed to lock in. You hear how things are supposed to, there's a feeling to it. There's a sense of certain chords that are dissonant, have a clutter to it. And then there's certain chords that are very open. And as an engineer, we bring all these things in. We're thinking about frequency. We're thinking about how things stack, how things are spaced, and all those things. You don't know what to EQ or to brighten or to darken unless you've had lots of listening and lots of ear training, because until you know that language, it's very hard to just do anything more than grab a plug-in preset or see, oh, let's turn up the high end of dB and see if it sounds better. Yeah, I like that better, and there's nothing wrong with any of that, but I would just encourage anyone who hasn't had ear training. There's this really old it was in magazines, in the back of magazines. It was called the relative pitch ear training course, and there was a perfect pitch one too, which works equally as well. And I would just highly recommend anyone who really wants to take the next step in engineering not to take a course on DAWs and a course on any all that stuff, but just to spend 6 months training your ears to be able to hear chords and melody and whatnot.
Mm.
So
That human element is so important. But you just reminded me then of, and I don't know if this is still happening, but a few years ago there was that, I guess, explosion of AI mastering facilities. Send your song for $20 or however much, we'll master
yeah.
it and send it back. The AI will. Um, was that was that threatening in any way? Did that pose a threat to the mastering profession? Or I mean, how did you deal with that, and what did you think of that?
I took issue with the way it was. I wasn't threatened by it per se, because for me everything's always been about relationship, and any of these people that I work with have spent 100 hours on a particular song. They know everything about it. They know too much about it, and there's no computer program that's going to be able to take all that, assimilate it, and give them back something they like.
Right.
That's never happened. I mean, these are people who, if you change the sample rate from 48 to 44.1, they would hear the difference on the song because they know it so intimately. You could change the bit rate from 16 to 24, they would hear it because they know it so intimately. It's like, so from that point of view, I always knew that, like, the relational aspects, the artists and the artists, the artists in the industry would not really have it, other than as it's a great tool if you need something quickly mastered to hear, oh, what does this mix sound like really loud, but I did take issue with the loose use of AI. That's such a giant, I mean, a lot of people talk about AI and there's, anyway, I felt like they used it too loosely. It really, all these, if anything, it was advanced machine learning, and it was, make it this loud, put this kind of smiley face EQ on it, and or whatever, or cut the frequencies that, there was. I'm not talking down about it, because it's a great innovation, and it's people trying to do better and provide better options. But I did kind of like, I had this kind of mean meme that I made, and it was, when I was thinking about AI mastering, I thought there has got to be a picture, and I literally thought this, there's got to be a picture of a robot putting ketchup on a burger and totally failing it and just like smothering it in. Maybe I saw it before or something, but I went and searched the internet for a couple hours, and I found a picture of a robot with a ketchup bottle, and there was this beautiful burger, but this robot had taken the ketchup and it just like totally covered the burger in it and missed it, and put ketchup everywhere, all over the burger, totally ruined the burger, too much ketchup. And it's like, that was my picture for what automatic mastering is. It's just this robot that comes and is supposed to just catch up your burger, but it can't even bring the, because mastering is like the final, is like the ketchup on your burger. The burger's already been cooked, the bread's already been chosen, you got some lettuce there. I'm supposed to just come in there and put some condiments on it and just take it that extra 2 seconds, and you just too much ketchup. That's so that's kind of what I mean, I don't mean to demean the people who have put a lot of time and effort in it, it's a great thing, but it's not, that is not what I do. If that is
Sure.
mastering, then I don't do mastering. I do something else. We don't do the same
Right.
thing, And so it's a disingenuous or maybe too hyperbolic use of the term mastering. It's just too, we do different things. You do you make millions of dollars a year, churning them out. I'm going to do the artisan thing, and let's not call that the same thing.
Sure, absolutely. Dale, you've been so kind with your time. We'll finish things up shortly. I just wanted to ask you one or two final things. On that tangent of innovations, Dolby Atmos has obviously been a big innovation over the past couple of years. How has it affected what you do as a mastering engineer? And you mentioned earlier that you've set up a couple of the rooms in your studios for Dolby
Yeah,
Atmos. How
yeah.
how does it affect how you operate?
Well, early on in the pandemic, I was so thankful because I started to hear murmuring amongst my friends, like Maurice at PMC, Carrie at Dolby, that this Atmos thing, which had been around since, like, been in use in industry like since Iron Man 2, so it's been around, but it's never been introduced to the public as like a something for music so much. Even though there was a lot of music mixed in it, it wasn't really accessible. And then they were like, you should really look into this. And I was really impressed by the format. I was impressed by the dynamic range that was, and also just the ability to be immersed in a piece of music. I mean, it just, if it's done properly, um, and given the right, if it's given the right focus, um, and the right people are working on it, it can take a project from like great to otherworldly.
Mm.
Because it doesn't need to meet the loudness standards of stereo. So you get your kick drums are 6 dB fatter, you feel it more, and you're kind of surrounded, um, if it's done right, surrounded in a good way with the music. It should, it can turn into being a gimmicky thing. A lot of people think that just because we're doing Atmos, we need to have things flying around the room and whatnot. That's not my mentality or approach. I always feel like the music should still be coming in front of you. You would never go into a room and have your back to the stage watching Beck, or something. You still want the music to be coming from in front of you. You still want to be a listener, but there's one of the things, the artist that I was working with, he was sitting on the couch, and he just really wanted to have all the BGVs kind of lightly spread around the back, so that you didn't feel like you felt like you're part of like a choir or something. These are some of the sorts of things that are amazing. Or Rufus Du Sol live in Joshua Tree I mastered, and they have this beautiful, amazing performance that they recorded way out in Joshua Tree as the sun's going down. So it starts with the sun up and it all bright, and it ends with a massive light show and them performing in the dark. And they took all of this amazing electronic music that we only knew in stereo, and they performed it and mixed it in Atmos. So you're part of this kind of like, it's not only like a symphony of music, but it's a symphony of like dimension, and you just kind of get lost in it all. And it's really amazing. It's a wonderful creative tool. It's very little understood still at this point. I mean, even though a lot of people are starting to release, especially with Apple Spatial coming out, which is basically kind of, I don't want to call it a derivative, but that's the best word I can come up with now. It's basically Atmos within, wrapped for Apple Music. And the music that I'm hearing, the great Atmos mixes coming out that you hear on the AirPod Pros or the AirPod Maxes, rival any stereo thing, and a lot of times it beats it because it doesn't need to be crushed. It doesn't need to, be so compressed and so saturated and distorted to get people's attention. Atmos is kind of like the music gets your attention, the space, and especially the tone
Mm.
is the attention getting thing, and not necessarily the level. So I think there's a lot. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of it in cars, a lot more of it in home theaters. But my favorite use of it is in the headphones, which is where most people consume music. And I think Atmos in the headphones is spectacular when done right.
Nice, nice. Dale, we just have a couple of questions that people have submitted in the question tab. If you don't mind, if I
Yeah,
quickly ask them. Now, I've never done
man.
this, so let me see. Oh, here we go. All right. So, question uh, from Shields Mark says, I just moved to a new place with only a 7 foot 9 inch high basement that I'll be building out for recording vocals, guitar, and mixing. Have you any experience or tips having to work in a less than ideal space?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will have a thousand, ideas about this. I don't hold anything to be necessarily like sacrilegious or anything to be like gospel with, oh, you got to do it this way. But my first recommendation for someone with a small room, make sure you have a great set of speakers, of course. Make sure you have plenty and plenty and plenty of trapping. A lot of people go out and buy expensive diffusers and all this stuff, and those can be used when you have an acoustician who really knows what they're doing to place them. But especially with such a low ceiling, just trap as much as you can. Like I would recommend 4 inches of Roxel Rockboard 80 on the walls over a 2 inch air gap, and just make your own panels and just cover as much as possible. And then, I know a lot of people don't believe in room correction so much, but I actually think in small situations like that, like a Trinov, could potentially make a less than ideal thing actually pretty ideal to work in. So those, I would say, trap the heck out of it with Roxel Rockboard 80 and Owens Corning 703, and then if you have the funds available, get a Trinov.
Man, that's amazing advice, Dale. They have one follow-up question, which says, how do you maintain a modern, bright, upfront vocal while maintaining warmth and avoiding the harsh brittleness we sometimes hear? Thanks so much for sharing your time and knowledge.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting balance, but a lot of times, really what I mean, at least the way I approach it is I approach adding tone to the bottom with like a DW Fern VT5, or there's like, for people who don't have that, there's a great Acousticus plugin of called Ruby. That can add a lot of tone to the bottom, and then you do subtractive EQ, you add tone, it'll probably be too much. You use subtractive EQ to not only correct the areas that you're over accentuating with the tone EQ, but also fine. I use a lot of FabFilter Pro Q3 for my fine tuning work in the upper mids, and for the subtractive work to kind of counteract what's happening with my tonal EQ. And it just is a matter of the balance I come about is by not only listening to the mix reference and making sure I'm taking what the team has already gone and staying in that same direction, not trying to take a right turn right at the end of the project. No, I want to continue on the line of thought from the project and the team, but also I listen to these references that help me understand. Like I love the like the balance of Boyfriend or the balance of Apeshit. Like I was talking, these are great, warm but upfront things, and I'll throw on those references as I'm listening, and really try to find the points that are sticking out, but that I can cut, but still allow the vocal to stay forward. I try to listen very, very, very deeply and take my time and have things. This is a little bit, I don't know, woo-woo-y, but I like try to lose myself in the music and try to have things appear to me. So I'm not actively listening a lot of the time for like, oh, what can I cut or what can I boost? I'm trying to just listen and have things come to me in my mind like, hey, you should cut 1.5K, or that 4K is kind of buzzing. It kind of sounds like a kazoo on the vocal, and we don't want our vocals sounding like kazoos, so let's cut that. It tends to be a much more intuitive process than it is a, let's cut 5K, so.
Man, Dale, thanks so much for everything today, for all your time and for sharing all your expertise there. It's been so great to chat with you, and best of luck at the Grammys. What an exciting
Hey,
week you've got.
thank
Oh,
thank you. We need the luck, and whoever wins, we're grateful, and we celebrate and win or loss, and well, even getting a nomination, it isn't a loss. It's either way, we've won, and we'll just celebrate whoever's winning this year, and just stay positive and have fun while we're at it.
amazing. Love it, Dale. Hey, thank you so much for your time. I know you've got a lot more mastering to do today, so we'll let you go, but genuinely, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Great to chat with you.
It's great to chat with you as well, and thank you everyone who came through.
See you, mate. Bye-bye.
See ya.